Good morning. I'm Carol Lancaster, Dean of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, and it's my great privilege and honor to welcome today the President of Georgia, Mixeil Saakashvili, to Georgetown University this morning, and to welcome all the faculty, students, friends of Georgetown, and friends of Georgia. Today, and I apologize, by the way, for our starting a little late. One can never predict the traffic in Washington and all the other things that impede progress from one side of this town to the other. The program today is going to begin with a talk by President Saakashvili. The topic, I think you may have it in your program, Why Georgia's Transformation Matters in the Post-Soviet Space. We'll follow that with a panel and a discussion among the panelists sitting on the stage. I'll introduce them in a minute. And then we'll have a little time at the end for question and answer. Let me begin by introducing Angela Stent, Professor of Politics at Georgetown University, to my immediate left. She's the director of the Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies. She's also a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution. She served in the Department of State, the National Intelligence Council. She was the officer for Russia and has her PhD from Harvard. At the very end of our panelists there is Professor Jeffrey Anderson, Grof Galtz Professor of Politics and Director of the BMW Center for German and European Studies. He's widely published on German politics and foreign policy, and he has his PhD from Yale. So we're covering all the bases here. And then, to introduce briefly President Saakashvili, he did his undergraduate work at the University of Kiev. He studied at Columbia. He worked in New York in a well-known law firm. He returned to Georgia in the mid-1990s and ran for Parliament and won. He became Minister of Justice in the year 2000. And then in November 2003, after a rigged parliamentary election, President Saakashvili led a peaceful revolt against the government known as the Rose Revolution. 6 weeks later, he was elected president of Georgia in a landslide vote. Since becoming president of Georgia, he has focused on the political and economic modernization of his country and has committed it to integration with the West. A World Bank study, which was released this week, gives Georgia high marks for successfully fighting corruption, holds it up as an example for other countries facing similar problems. Georgia has also been a valuable security partner for the United States. Its troops have fought alongside U.S. and NATO forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. Indeed, today, it has the second largest per capita troop contingent in Afghanistan. In January 2009, the United States and Georgia signed a charter on strategic partnership, committing both countries to cooperate on a broad range of activities. The United States supports Georgia's territorial integrity and has worked with Georgia on counterterrorism issues. So, with great pleasure, we welcome President Saakashvili, and with interest, we await his presentation. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you, Dean Lancaster, for this generous introduction, and thank you to Dr. Tent and Dr. Anderson for being here. Thank you to all of you. It's my belated but long-standing dream to find myself among these venerable halls when the truth of the matter is that the closest distance I could get ever to the walls of Georgetown University was on a bike when I would bike from George Washington University, which I was attending. And of course, I mean, we all students at George Washington University had certain, well, we always thought that George Washington was better than Georgetown, but we always said it was better. And what we thought, deep in our heart, that was a little bit different matter. So we had something so anyway, so I can say that I made it at least for today. I came here. I have a big speech with me, but I don't think I should read it because that would be I don't want you just woken up, and I don't want you to put you back to sleep. But so I'll try to speak my mind and forgive me if I say something extra. But anyway, so here we are. Georgia is a small country. For some people, it's in the middle of nowhere. It was hard time when I was studying back in the 90s in the U.S. You always had to add BA Georgia, but not American Georgia, not U.S. Georgia, but Georgia. And then you had those long geographic explanation. You saw even today, Dean Lancaster had small trouble pronouncing my name. And back in those times, it was totally unpronounceable. So actually, it was even the biggest march we made for the last 15 years is to put ourselves on the world map. But in our part of the world, Georgia does matter. And it had lots of, it is a big historic place because it was one of the greatest old civilizations, several thousand years old. Just to give you two examples, world medicine, and you might not know, comes from Georgia, Queen Medea. That was queen of a civilization that was called Colchi, that was competing with the ancient Greek civilization. And wine comes from Georgia. And they actually still make wine in the way they used to make wines back 5,000-6,000 years ago. I have a small vineyard. I still make wine in jars that our ancestors used to make it. But besides this fact, of course, it's a very ancient civilization. It's one of the first Christian states. We've been Christians officially since 4th century. When the whole country and the king at that time adopted Christianity. We have a separate alphabet, one of 14 alphabets in the world, and we have language which nobody else understands in the world, but that's a handicap, obviously. That's also sometimes can be an advantage. But also the point here is that Georgia has been, by the time Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s, one of the most criminalized, one of the most corrupt, one of the most, and the classical definition of a failed state. Government could supply population 80% of the time with electricity. No roads were built. If you would go to schools were like not heat, no electricity. Kids would be in their gloves, hats, so whatever coats they could get. Freezing. Teachers would be busy getting wood to heat up some whatever heating devices they would obtain for that school. So, the policemen, the government officials were paid no salaries. Policemen had to buy their position from the government. Then they had to get their own cars, put their gas, go out and stand on the roads. They would get no salaries. They would have to extort money from the people, passerbys, and then pay monthly dues to the government from which they bought their position. One would imagine how it was. By the way, it's nothing special. If you want to see it, go to Russia. It's still there like this. So you don't have to travel back in time. The taxes were not collected. So I became president. We swept through this Rose Revolution. We were a young team, way younger. Now, the good news is that this team had stayed young, because I take care of all of us that it's lots of young people come in all the time. The bad news is that I don't get younger. So I look old now for my team, and I'm looking forward to the time when I will look obsolete. However, at that time we were all young. I was 30, just nearly turned 36 at that moment when I got into presidential office. And there was this big group of young people, some in their 20s, some most in their early 30s. They were full of ideals. They knew that they wanted to change something. They knew the challenge was so huge. We didn't know from where to start. But we really wanted to make it. And some Western British journalists at that time compared us to a newly released movie of Ocean 11. And so actually this was we had to take huge risks. And first risk we took that we looked at all our big-bellied, dangerous-looking policemen, and we thought, what can we do? Well, can we change them? Not really. So what do you do to these people? So we fired all of them. And one day, Georgia stayed without entire police force. It was spring of 2004. Suddenly there were no policemen on the street. There was no police number to call to in case of whatever problem. So what happened? It was before the holiday season. Holiday season had started. We pledged to people that in 3 to 4 months we'll bring a new police force. We started to recruit young people, but meanwhile there was no police. So what happened was that traffic accidents went down, and even crime rates, crime incidents slightly went down. So we discovered that police was part of the problem, not part of the solution. So I was wondering for some time, maybe we don't need police at all. But then we recruited a new one, and what happened that, now, if the old police force had 5% confidence rate, the new one has 86. It's higher than anything in Europe. Sometimes we compete, I think, with Finland or with Denmark. Nothing in the region. Crime rate, it used to be the highest in that zone. Even today, 70% of mafia bosses in Russia come from Georgia, while in Georgia, crime rate is almost 5 times less than in Russia. And according to the persistent European Union studies, we are the safest country in Europe, lowest crime rate. We were competing for the last 3 years with Iceland, which is obviously an island, but now we made it. We are ahead of them even without creating an ocean between us and the rest of the world. So that's where we are. On the other hand, taxes. People didn't like to pay taxes. They don't like to pay tax anywhere. But in Georgia, it was even worse because, we were under another country, right? We hated that country, Soviet Union. So we thought that if you would cheat that country, that was the most noble cause you could do. Cheat the country and benefit your family. It was almost the ultimate act of patriotism. But to move from there and to understand that this is now your own country, wait a minute, it's gone, the other one, and you have common good, you have common things to do, it was a hard thing, especially if the government officials were so corrupt that people wouldn't see any benefits of paying taxes anyway. When I came to the office, and you can imagine, government officials were not paid also money. I got my first envelope after 2 weeks, I got my first paycheck, and it was, guess how much? $40 US. And I said, what the hell is that? They told me it's your presidential salary. And I said, what about the previous president? He didn't look like he was starving. No, he wasn't, but that's exactly what he was collecting for all these years. And so what I understood, and said, no, wait, I cannot live for that, but the treasury was empty. So then I thought to myself, we went to some international groups and we told them, give us some cash to pay some tax collectors, government ministers, cabinet members. Me, the president, I want to get some a little bit more decent salary. Some other people, and we'll see. And I was thinking if we could increase within a year tax collection by 30%, I would have considered it a success. Well, it doubled within 3 months. And if you look at where we are now, we decreased taxes by 60%, and the tax collection went up overall almost 20 times. This is exactly the index of what had been stolen before, the index of shadow economy. There were many other changes that we did. Bureaucracy. We scrapped 90% of all the government agencies. So, and you know, the government agencies, that people thought, you know, if they don't exist, there will be mass fires in restaurants. There will be rats will like invade our cities, eat small toddlers, like everything will go really bad. None of that had happened. I mean, they just disappeared, and what we have now is there is this Canadian Center of Law and Democracy that did studies with, there is another watchdog, Transparency International, in 164 countries on people's surveys, how they regard their government bureaucracy. And guess what? People, I mean, they compared, it's a kind of very comprehensive test. People said that we have second most efficient bureaucracy in the world after New Zealand, after having one of the worst ones. Having had one of the worst ones. So, and then we have one-stop principle, you know. There is also lots of psychology in it. We build lots of new buildings, and they are all from transparent glass, including the police building, tax officials, one-stop shop in Georgia. To get passport, it's maximum 10 minutes. To get a driver's license, maximum 20 minutes. To get customs clearance for any goods, I'm not talking about this briefcase or suitcase or bag, but I'm talking about like truck. It's around 10 minutes. To go through border guard gates, you don't have to take out your passports. There's electronic chip in every passport, including the ones you are wearing, and you just keep it in your pocket like you would have a ski pass, say, when you pass through. You know, some gate on a ski lift. For those of you who are skiers, and so that's the thing that had changed. And the World Bank puts Georgia as the easiest place in Eastern Central Europe and post-Soviet world to do business. Imagine that we have world's fastest property registration, world's fastest company registration, world's fastest customs procedure. Which means that, for instance, like, and this is all in one window. This one building, glass, smiling people sitting there. You come in, they greet you, and you go through. You cannot, even if you want to stay, they won't allow you to stay. Go and get your documents. So that's how it works. And so from all that, you know, I think. The country had really transformed not only itself, but it had really become the hub for the region. It had become a biggest trading hub. You know, they just had completed the biggest department, the biggest shopping mall in Europe in Georgia. Georgia is basically everybody around in our region buys cars in Georgia because it's so easy. It just takes a few minutes, and you don't have to pay extra or anything. There are many other things for which people come to the country. We are now on a, you know, we have this now frenzy of constructing new airports, new railway, fast-track train, highways in all directions, new cities, without having oil and gas. That's a very important thing. You know, I saw on the way here a photo of my good friend Emir of Qatar. Well, Doha is a beautiful city. Well, some of our cities start to look like Doha, with small difference that there we have a little bit less gas now. We don't have any of it, almost. But that's what also free enterprise can bring. And so and again, that brings us back to what brings me here to the United States. I had a few days ago a very good meeting with President Obama, and he called Georgia publicly in front of television cameras the model for reforms, democracy, and economic success for the whole region. And it was very nice to hear it from the president, but it's not only him. Secretary Clinton said the same time, many times, same things. Yesterday I went through senators, like lots of them, and all of them are saying the same. Marco Rubio said that, you know, it's a role model for the whole region. You know, Senator McCain said previously that that he thought that he was Georgian. Maybe he is, I don't know. But the point here is that and you know, we went through everything. We went through, in 2005, Russia blocked all the energy supplies to Georgia. We imported 80% of our electricity, gas for cooking and heating and everything else for industrial purpose from Russia. We refurbished our energy sector. Now we are exporting electricity to Russia. In 2006, they blocked all our exports to Russia. That means we lost our 60% of our export market in 1 week. We grew double-digit that year, and since then we've been steadily growing with twice as bigger pace than Russia, with oil and gas that they have. In 2008, they invaded us. President Medvedev clearly said why did he just said recently if we hadn't invaded Georgia, Georgia would have been in NATO. So very valid reason to destroy your neighbor, right? And they invaded us, and country bounced back. I think those people, and that's the point. You know, for Russian point of view, Georgia is a jewel of the empire. Georgia looks like Northern California. It has amazing beaches, very green hills, beautiful high mountains with skiing. The same day you can swim and ski most of the time of the year. Very warm water. And good food, good place. And then for Russians it was, okay, this nice place, these people are very entertaining, they are good singers, good dancers, they have good food, they are nice people to be with, but the rest it will take care of it. They don't have to bother with things like having their own country or having their own success story. But suddenly what's happening, everybody underestimates my people. They thought that corruption was cultural for my people. The study was released in the World Bank 2 days ago, and it's coincidentally 10 years ago, then Georgia's president came to exactly at that time to Washington. He was invited to the World Bank. He was lambasted for an hour for corruption, and his assistance was cut off. 10 years later, I went there to present the only ever book World Bank made about defeating corruption in any member country state. And I got a standing ovation on behalf of my country. So they thought that we were, in the past, that corruption was cultural. Well, they underestimated my people. They thought that it's very easy to manipulate our people into all kind of electoral promises or all kind of cheap things. At every elections, they underestimate my people. They thought that once they invade, the people will just surrender, go back to proposed golden cage, as they were promising them. Illusionary one. They totally underestimate my people. My nation bounced back after that invasion dramatically. They thought that we would rather not bother ourselves with all these reforms and stuff and the very difficult road. Just go back to old ways of doing things. I think they severely underestimate my people. But I think also when I come to the United States, it's also a country that inspires me greatly. Because, I was, as Dean Lancaster told you, I was also a student here. And when I come here now, and you hear all these articles, see all the articles, newsstands, oh, America in decline. America is over. America is this and that. And you have a whole group of scholars with pundits with like very smart faces saying, yeah, we were too arrogant. Yeah, we shouldn't have done this and that. We should apologize to the world. Yeah, we are really over. I think they are over, but America is not over. And I think it's because when I came here, I came on a congressional scholarship. It wasn't hardly enough for New York. I lived in a suburb of New York in Astoria, Queens, in a basement. I had to ride a subway for 1 hour something every day to Columbia University. I had hardly money for food. 2 years later, I was living in a nice apartment, Central Park West. As you rightly said, I was working for a top law firm. And the main thing I had the sense that everything is possible in this country. Like it belongs to me. I can go all the way forward. And like a few days ago, I was at the Base Camp Summit in California, lots of young people, and I was thinking, and there was this crowd of Koreans, Chinese, Middle Easterners, South Americans, all kind of different people. Mostly newly arrived or arrived in the U.S. like, for instance, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And those who were here, who had been here for 2, 3, 4 years, they are like American. They talk American, they move American, body language is American. They speak English, which sounds American. And I suspect they even think already American. Well, I respect all the countries, but go to Korea and become Korean in 2 years. Good luck with that. Out of question, right? And that's exactly what makes this country so special. This country always had pessimists, always had defeatists. You know, if extraterrestrials had landed in Georgetown, would have or found always some percentage of political class, even they would say, let's surrender urgently and let's not bother ourselves with useless resistance. These extraterrestrials don't look as bad as we would imagine, as they look. They are not as bad as they look. But they would always find themselves in miserable minority. Because ultimately America, from our angle, is a big force in the world for good. And, you know, from everywhere, from people in Middle East revolutions to the streets of Moscow where things are going to happen this year. And as they will happen, I advise you to watch. It will be interesting. America is an inspiration to the people, as it had been inspiration to my nation and to people around my nations. So again, I think you are incredibly lucky, and I'm incredibly privileged to be here to talk to you. Thank you, and I'll take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for a very eloquent speech. I must say, as a resident of the District of Columbia, I can only dream of getting a driver's license in 20 minutes. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the Russian-Georgian relationship. As you said, there are young people now out in the streets in Moscow who want something different. They want a less corrupt system. They want a more competitive political system. Do you think eventually, when this younger generation comes into power, that the Georgian-Russian relationship would improve? Or is there something, I mean, you hinted at it in your speech, which is historical, maybe systemic, maybe even psychological, that makes Russian-Georgian relations so much more difficult than...
There is nothing. It's on the contrary. I think historically we are compatible with each of our neighbors. Otherwise, my small nation wouldn't have survived in that environment. I think by nature, Georgia is a very open society, very flexible people, very accommodating people for many things, except when it concerns their freedom. But I think what's interesting, but it's not my speculation. If you listen to what they're saying, basically almost every major leader in Moscow right now says that they want Georgian-type reforms in Moscow, in Russia. By the way, even Medvedev a couple of times, he said publicly, you know, okay, Georgia defeats corruption. Yeah, it's interesting. We don't like it. We hate Saakashvili. You know, Putin publicly pledged to hang me by my balls. But at the same time, they also liked, they had to say it. So when I was asked this, you know, he was like about I'll hang him, then I'll go again. Then he spoke at length about my tie, then he spoke about my nose, that he should slap my nose. And it's like I'm talking about multiple incidents of him talking. I don't listen to him all the time, but you know, when he talks about too much, then it gets also to me, right? So, and then there was, I think, David Frost who asked me, he asked Sir David, and what do you think about him, you know, making all these menaces on your body parts? I said, well, you know, he started very painfully. That part was really bad. Going up and up, all the way to the nose, yeah, it's getting less and less painful, and I'm getting used to it. But he's still better he keeps it virtual. I mean, he should keep, I mean, it for himself. But anyway, so that's but otherwise, the reality is that, you know, you get this people like, you know, famous anti-corruption bloggers or others that basically say that we looked at Georgian reforms. It's very interesting, mostly anti-corruption, but they're looking at other things. As I said, Georgia is getting now skyscrapers like in Doha or things. Very soon it will all come up without having oil gas. Russia is so wealthy. So they think if they can, without money, being so with such bad history of all this mismanagement, could come back, we can make it even like 10 times better, right? So, and even, I mean, I said, even existing Russian leadership, I think they already missed their chance. But, you know, in the past, for instance, their police, parts of their police reforms, law is rewritten from Georgian law. Now, one thing is to, one thing is to copy law, the other thing is to really have a spirit of it. They don't have the spirit, and when it's don't have spirit, it's not going to work. But they call their militia police like we did. They bought for them new cars recently. They, in most of the places, they try to do the same kind of thing. Like, I mean, they will send a group to study, and we cooperated with that group without, you know, there's not a big secret about it, but without really making a big fuss about it, because, of course, because we were more modernized, we become more, all the neighbors will be quiet. But because we are talking about 21st century, but we are seeing some of very old-fashioned rhetorics. The problem with them is that they thought that reforms are Trojan horse of the West. Instead of thinking that everything they do to reform their society, it's for their own good. That the world doesn't want them to reform because the world wishes them bad, but the world wishes them to be normal in order also for self-interest of the world, not to menace the others. But I think that's why I think there is this thing, strive for freedom, and it's unstoppable. But the other thing is that we are getting hundreds of thousands of tourists from Russia. By the way, they can enter Georgia without visa. Georgians can almost not go to Russia, and I don't think many of them want to. But interestingly, there is this thing that I told the other day, just joke that Russian tourists come see it at the airport, and they fill this form, this sort of simple form, and of course it says, you know, name, surname, and purpose, and then it says occupation, right? And then he says, no, just tourism, because obviously they occupy 20% of our territory with their tanks and troops, the expelled population there, But yeah, we are looking forward to the time when all these occupants will leave us forever, and we'll fill our beaches, even on the beautiful areas that are occupied and empty from population, and where the only people who sunbathe there are, you know, tank crews with their torso like up there naked. No, I think they will get the real tourists there, better looking than the soldiers, and they will be the ones who will feel our. I mean, this is inevitable that it's going to happen.
My question points in a different direction geographically, that is to the west, and in particular Georgia's aspiration to become a member of the European Union.
Yeah.
As Dean Lancaster pointed out, as you yourself said in your remarks, your country has come a remarkably long way in a very short period of time, and has come into its own as both a democracy, but also as a full-fledged international partner. And as you mentioned, the Georgian people deserve the majority of the credit for that, but I think you and your government can take a good share of that credit as well. Yet at the same time, like other post-Soviet republics, your country has grappled with the tensions that accompany a drive to modernize economically on the one hand, but also to take steps to consolidate and improve democracy on the other. And there are voices inside of Europe that are raising questions about recent political developments in Georgia, particularly concerning the role of the opposition, but also recent constitutional changes that seem to be, at least in their eyes, moving Georgia away from the accepted patterns of politics in the European Union. Do you feel that Georgia needs to take steps to reassure its European partners, its future European partners, that it remains on a glide path to fulfilling the Copenhagen criteria, and as such remains a viable candidate for membership down the road?
I think we should make it for the record very straight. The recent constitution changes were regarded as the European Union. I'll quote you because I remember it very well. That's fully corresponding to European spirit. These changes introduce European model of government to Georgia, which basically removes us away a little bit from American model, but brings us closer to mainstream European model. It's, I think what you are referring to, that some people were speculating whether it would be fitting Pepper's personalities, like including myself. I think everything that fits democracy fits also me. That's true, but what these changes have really done, that there will be no one center of power in Georgia. President will stay powerful, but government will be formed by the parliament. So parliament will be extremely powerful. Prime minister will have considerable powers. Local government had been strengthened, including the direct election of mayor of Tbilisi. Now some people can speculate, okay, can it leave some role with existing president and existing things? But this is up to people to decide. Constitution, the way we did it, is, I think this was my own experience as well, that right now on paper, president has almost unlimited power. It doesn't mean much in a small country that has freedom of speech and has vibrant society, which means actually that if you have great powers on paper and you can do just anything, but then people can say just anything and do just anything, then the politics move to the street. So the spirit of having new system where it's redistributed among different centers of power is exactly that, co-opting lots of stakeholders into political system, bringing people into one room and forcing them to work together, because otherwise the only alternative is chaos. And because I've seen it in 2007, there were street rallies in Georgia, and I had to resign and run again and reclaim my office back. And I thought it was the right way to do, even if I thought that the protesters were in minority. But I thought that, look, we did some very radical reforms, mental transformation. Most of these people would not accept it. I'm meaning these protesters, because some people, you're a small country of 5 million people. We fired 150,000 people, maybe 200 and 150,000. Most of them lived in downtown capital. Every time we wanted to recruit people for anti-government rallies, you could find them. So I thought, okay, let's see, are they really 100 and 150, or are they maybe more than half of the population? Let's test it at ballot box. And so by resigning, I had my president's term shortened, but I thought I got another second breath for the reforms. Now we're moving to the system when it's not only about the president, but the whole political class should want to continue the reform, which I think is already happening anyway. So let's see.
I think we have some time for a couple of questions from the audience. So if you are interested in asking a question, I'm going to start over here. Please say your name and your affiliation.
Hi, my name is Mark Nabor, and I'm a student interested in Eastern European studies. My question is, you successfully managed to win this battle with corruption in Georgia, and you mentioned that it took you to change the entire police system. How do you think, is there anything else in this recipe which can help to successfully win the corruption besides the police? Maybe something about developing independent political parties, and what did you do with the institution within the government? Thank you.
Yeah, I think police is only a small part of the system. It's a kind of spectacular one because people see them daily on the streets. But I think the biggest thing is to understand that society should have the sense that they own their own country. And that, of course, goes through political process. And I think one of the biggest things that have changed in Georgia is that trust in institutions, popularity of institutions, is always higher according to all the latest opinion polls than the institution holders themselves. And that's quite a change. And I think tax reform was way more important from the sense point of view of ownership, because right now in Georgia, almost 90% of the taxes are filed electronically. Most of the time, and it's no longer hard to get payment. I mean, Georgia has the fourth least tax burden in the world, according to Forbes magazine, after UAE, Qatar, and Hong Kong. However, still even that was too much of a burden before for the people. But now, and then because people are paying that because they think that it's distributed fairly. For instance, we are doing like for schools, We are doing one laptop per child program. We invited 10,000 Americans to teach English in Georgia. On these kind of things, this public money is spent. And we are doing now American Technology Campus in Georgia to have the major mainstream American university. So when you get this kind of issues and you get this kind of movement, then you think, okay, so maybe my tax dollars are going in the right direction. So as I said, from that point of view, political parties also do matter. Of course, as in any democracy, there will be political actors that are willing to abuse the system. But that's why you need strict campaign financing rules. You need equal access for people to television, to media. Then we also have laws to that. We have public financing for, because to balance the disparities of overall the outside money we've just increased public financing for political parties to more or less get fair play and playing field for all the actors. At minimum level, of course, then there is always extra, and then you cannot compete. But so from that point of view, in long run, the whole political class has to accept changes rather than just having one smart team or even just a leader having understanding where they were heading to. It's always will be the problem with this one team and one leader is unless they really move it to broader consensus of political class is that it will always be reversible. Nobody is permanent, nobody is eternal, and nobody is. People also might change and deteriorate, so that's how it works.
Great, thank you. Yeah, right here.
Peter Rajic, Department of Government and Society of Jesus. I had a privilege, Your Excellency, last year to spend a few months in Georgia for research and also witness the protests of May and the unfortunate events that followed, which made me think of a few events that happened before the Rose Revolution, which is you were the signatory of probably the most important signatory of the 10 Steps to Liberty document. And the first point of that document was a call to lustration, which is the removal of former officials, former communist officials and spies. Yet, as your government took over, the promise was not delivered until last May. My question is, could you explain to us why that promise was not delivered, even though that we know that you work very hardly on questions of reform of the educational system and corruption and other sectors? Is that explainable through the events that actually then occurred in May last year through former President Borjanadze? Thank you very much.
Well, the question you were asking why we didn't have law that would remove former communist and KGB officials from the government. Well, we don't need law. You should look at the age of our officials to understand that that had been already done. I'm the oldest member of my government. I was in last year of the university when Soviet Union collapsed, so I had not had a chance, fortunately, misfortune of serving in any Soviet structure. Every single public official in my government is younger than me. That's why I was joking that I might start to look obsolete. And then, we have government ministers in their 20s that not only had not worked under the Soviet Union, but don't even remember it. So it's not a relevant issue. And that makes Georgia to stand out among former Soviet countries. And actually, that's a very wide issue, and it goes back to biblical story of Moses taking his people through the desert. Not that anybody is comparing themselves to Moses, but the reality is that you get this new generation that have not lived in not free societies. Not even have not served it, but not lived in it. And they are the ones that are directing the country. And by the way, I'm spending lots of time with the high school A graders. They're not voters. They're 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And we have elections this year. You need to be of minimum age of 18 to vote. But for me, it's very important because they are the ones who will be like totally free from any residual things, from old past. And from that point of view, I think what you would ask me what was the biggest, and it's a big, painful issue because, my grandmother is still very much alive and active, and she
and there are still some people from her generation. They're my parent generation. They're, of course, a little bit old people, a little older than me, and for them, it's all these youngsters coming into government and telling them how to live, painful. But then they again vote for them because they understand. We all understand that for society to move forward, you need all the time to have fresh blood, new things coming in, and getting. And that's why these younger ones, politically maybe they might not be active, but their grandparents, when they take decisions, they would be asking them as well, because they are the internet generation. They have entirely different view of the world, and it's happening everywhere in the world. By the way, here it's happening, but in our case it's a double thing, because in our case, double handicap of being internet generation, not being internet generation one, and being Soviet generation, another one. So from that point of view, moving away from being from non-free society to free society, we really need to do a very unconventional things, including this generational change that happened by nature, by itself. We didn't push up or force it. But.
Mr. President, do you have time for one more quick question?
Sure.
I know you have a very tight schedule. I'd like to call on somebody over here. How about the gentleman right there with the glasses? Yes? No, you. Don't turn around. In the middle, yeah, right, in the middle of the row. Yeah, stand. Yeah, right, you got it. I'm sorry to be so complicated.
Mr. President,
don't you have like gender equality?
I was looking for a woman. I was looking for a woman. Where are the women here with the hands in the air? I was trying. Good point, Mr. President. Yes, please say who you are.
I'm sorry to meddle in your internal...
No. I was thinking, where am I going to find a woman? I'm sure there's hands in the air, but it's not easy to see sometimes. So
Nicola Saakashvili, alumni at the University of Chicago. Mr. President, you talked about the reforms.
It's a quick question, yes.
Yes, it's a quick question.
We talked about over here. We have to go to a woman over here after you, so quick.
You talked about the reforms you've done in Georgia, and I was wondering if you would be kind enough to share with us, in the past 10 years that you've been the president, what were the most significant missteps that your administration has, in your view, done, and if you think if you could go back and change that? Thank you.
Well, I think when you reform, you always obviously make some mistakes or not make some mistakes. But look where Georgia was. Our economy in nominal terms has quadrupled. Crime rate was dropped 5 times. The poverty went down from 52% down to 17%. We just had constructed 150 new hospitals, new entirely modern healthcare system, entirely modern education system we are building. Full computerization had happened. 3,000 miles of roads are being finished, new roads with a small country. And we have positive migration balance since 8 years after 16 years of negative migration balance, and we have positive rates since 7 years after 16 years of negative birth rate. Which means actually that all the sound credentials are there, a framework. If you ask me, I don't know very few countries in the world, I don't know any, to put it very modestly, bluntly, who had progress with this pace. Of course, coming from low levels, so it's relatively maybe easier. But on the other hand, what was my mistake? I will again be maybe radical and say every time I made compromise, I regretted it later on the reforms. Because every time I said, okay, I'll do it later, 1 year later, 2 years later, yeah, maybe this person is too powerful, maybe, maybe this law is not the right time. For instance, like we accepted last year law on minority protection for religious minorities. Huge backlash against the law. But every year we try to adopt that. I said, yeah, maybe not this year, next year, we don't need no trouble, right? I regret I didn't do it first year of my presidency. And it would have been backlash anyway, first year, second year, seventh year. So that's how we see it. And from that point of view, I was lucky enough to get second chance as reformer several times together with my people. But
most of the reformers never get second chance. Window of opportunity shuts down very fast. And we should always be, one thing I learned from this amazing lack of having always second chance is that don't take your chance, don't try, don't postpone, don't delay. Because you think, you are now great, popular things, and all the time is ahead of, no. Everything is very temporary. So from that point of view, my advice to anybody who aspires to be in public service, if you can change something when you are there, do it. Do it, and so that you don't have to revisit it later.
Can we do one quick question from a young woman? Okay, please, right there. Very quick question, please.
President Saakashvili, thank you so much on behalf of all the women in this hall. I'm Victoria Kupchinetsky, Russian Service of the Voice of America. Mr. President, how would you define the Russian-Georgian relations at this point in history? Do you think the countries have started moving towards each other or not really?
Well, I already answered that question. I think people-to-people relation, I think there was always certain sympathy. Russia, but on the other hand, you should realize Russia occupies 20% of my country's territory. 500,000 people, every 10th Georgian, cannot go back to their houses. I have here Minister of Economy, Vera Kobari, who was born, raised in Sukhumi like her great-grandparents, like everybody from her ancestors. She cannot go back to Sukhumi because your president, not your, but Russian president, Medvedev decided that it's no longer her house. Since then, Medvedev is running public registries to decide such things, right? So I believe in fair public registries, not the ones run by Putin and Medvedev. And we have 500,000 people like that. And we have, a small place called South Ossetia, where 7,000 local inhabitants are left and 20,000 Russian troops are stationed. A few dozen miles from Tbilisi. The way it works with, I can tell you what kind of relations I personally have now with Russian leadership. Every time my plane takes off, and it started like 1.5 years ago, I was driving to the airport, and my pilot tells me, the person who is in charge of my protection, we saw on the radars that Russian air defenses are targeted our plane. Highest degree of alert. Just one pushes button left will be down. What do? I said, take off. We took off, and every time we flew, like for a few months, every time they would have high degree of alert from the air defense that are in our sovereign territory. Only Hugo Chavez and Putin don't believe that it's our territory. Otherwise, it's our territory under every other responsible international member and of the international community. Then they thought that, they thought maybe that I don't see them because we look at the radars and they look at it, right? So now then I was flying I usually fly a small Cessna plane for pleasure, but I also had to open a small airport that day. And so I was flying the Cessna, piloting it myself. So just before I took off, my press secretary came to me, she was like very, very nervous, and she said, every Russian website says that you are taking off in 40 minutes now. Suddenly it's on these websites, and they will shoot you down. That they are at the highest degree of alert, and all the missiles are pointed at you, and they will shoot you down. I said, well. Now I said, please, make public declaration. We know that you are targeting us. We are seeing you, don't worry. You don't have to put it on websites. We are seeing you, and we don't care. We will fly anyway. It's my country. And, that's the kind of relations we have. But I think it's very temporary.
Thank you.